I was recently asked by the California Healthy Nails Association, which is like a workers' rights group that's predominantly Viet manicurists or like nail salon workers, want a Facebook Live next week in Vietnamese to discuss strategies and tips and tricks and just even open a discussion of how people feel short after the Atlanta shootings and how they don't feel safe going to work. Some have brought firearms. They may or may not be fully trained in that. There's a lot of different politics involved and a lot of paranoia. It's both and. I think the time to have captured it at its peak was like maybe a couple weeks ago, last week. With these like kind of one and done seminars, I think it's starting to like die down again and people are starting to forget like the actual safety and harm of very vulnerable communities.
Yeah, I kind of noticed something similar up here in the Bay Area. Where I'm at in San Jose in the South Bay, it's like really spread out. So it's different than in like San Francisco or Oakland where there's Chinatowns and there's more condensed Asian communities. But I know the news coverage has definitely died down. And when I followed up in some of the groups that have formed the patrols here, it seems like they've kind of streamlined things as well to where they're not just patrolling certain corners all the time. And it seems like they even have a system down where it's like, if you need a chaperone, call this number. San Jose, everything is so spread out, but incidents have been happening a lot. And I don't know why, I think a lot about Silicon Valley and like, I get super critical. I've always been kind of, already anti-capitalist before I even worked in tech. And I just get angry because I'm like, okay, you get all these like platitudes from, like CEOs and they're donating their tax write-off money to who knows what organization. But I'm like, you guys have engineers, you could code something. And I'm just thinking like, well, there could be like something other than just an info line by the patrol groups. There could be tools to help. They have all those resources, but I kind of get a little bit pessimistic about all that. With Tran, our parkour coach, he mentioned that like up in San Francisco when he was going to like the gun stores to do paperwork, a majority of them are like Asians right now, of all ages, like young Asians, but especially, more elders. And I think that's always interesting because I feel like, Asian American gun culture as its own thing really has never been a thing, and out of necessity, it's kind of popping up. So, in terms of like self-defense programs, I see a lot of seminars, but nothing I think consistent. There was one that was really cool. It was Black and Asian Solidarity up in Oakland by a boxing coach, and made it on the news, and I thought it was really cool. I reached out to him, to offer to like help out with any future events and just to even connect with, local martial artists that are anti-racist.
I'm not against firearms, like personally I'm not, but I am concerned about like inappropriate training or like, inadequate amount of training. Like when I was doing just interviews for like a market research class, and it was like in one of my interviews, the individual had a concealed carry permit. So you could pay whatever it costs for a concealed carry permit. I think here it's like $50. And you have the license to carry, but this individual, even though they were born in Texas and they had grown up with guns all their lives, would not feel confident in being able to pull out a pistol accurately, consistently, and in time in the event of a self-defense situation. And that's what's concerning for me, is that you can get a gun. We have the Second Amendment for a reason. But if you're not trained, you end up shooting yourself in the foot quite literally. Like, you're not really that much better of a shot than a law enforcement officer. It actually ends up being counterintuitive. The other concern I have, and I follow these groups because like I'm curious, and again, it was for market research, is on Instagram. And they're not many, but there is a solid handful, is that they applaud being Korean rooftop Asians. That is also problematic. Like, I understand protecting livelihood, and I can't consciously agree with it in the name of anti-blackness. You can like your guns, and you can make your case for self-defense, and I would, as an instructor, caution severely of appropriate and consistent training, no different than I would for any self-defense course that's open hand or weaponless. But it's the same to me, is that you need to know what the fuck you're doing. You can't be worse or the same as a law enforcement officer. I would expect even more out of a citizen to, you know, if you're taking the course, if you're doing the effort for the permit, to take it seriously. You're responsible for every bullet. If you're not willing and able to take that responsibility, you have no business holding a gun.
I feel the same way. Like, I got into firearms like right before COVID and the lockdown started, so you know the timing was a little bit off. I've always been into it, but I think I wanted to like really prepare, take care of my own mental health too. So that's also a big area, making sure you take care of your mental health. And I feel like it's kind of like the taboo here, where most gun owners don't want to, or you know, they don't want to admit. I feel like a lot of like American gun owners won't be like, oh yeah, I'm anxious, or like depression and things like that. But you know, how many gun owners are white supremacists with like anger issues? You know, like I'm willing to bet like a lot. But there's a lot more pages now of progressive gun owners, even like a podcast thing called like Walk the Talk America, but they focus a lot on, you know, at least men's mental health and yeah, what that looks like in terms of in relation to gun ownership, meaning that like, you know, use a buddy system, have a friend. And this goes into mental health too, like having a crisis plan. If you own guns, I feel like that should definitely be part of it. Like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm thinking about it, have a friend that will take it for you. So for me, like responsibility also goes into that arena as well. The same approach I have towards martial arts, which is it should be empowering, you know, but we shouldn't be like obsessed with like the fear and like the scenarios of like, oh, what happens if this happens? I'm prepared, right? Because I think that kind of defeats the purpose of empowerment. And I feel like with guns, I feel like I'm privileged in the sense that I got started with like an instructor last year right away. And before that, I went to like the gun range, like the public one where you kind of just stand there statically and shoot. And I always thought that people that did that a lot, you know, the majority of people, of gun owners are, you know how to use their gun. But after like, you know, taking classes with an instructor, I realized, oh, and being around other people who were like, oh, dang, I didn't know like this is what needs to be done. And they've, you know, been to the range like thousands of times, and suddenly like having to draw from, you know, their holster or tucked in their shirt in the safe holster is completely different. And yeah, you can easily mess up. You can snag your finger, you know, it accidentally goes off on your foot. Like little details, like having your eyes on it the whole time. Training those little things made me realize that there's a lot that goes into it. And I think my instructor even said it's a perishable skill if you don't stay on top of it. I've had friends that were just kind of like cocky about it and overconfident, and they took like one tactical fun workshop and like years ago, and they just think that they still have it. Realizing that that's a perishable skill kind of put in my head the sense of urgency that like if people are going to train firearms, should do it in kind of like a community that takes care of each other, you know, for mental health, peer support, but also so that you can be consistent, and so that's not like, oh, it's me holding my own ground type of thing.
And I like the term perishable skill because I feel that way for self-defense as well, is that in America, this whole like take a pill, quick, easy, one type thing, here's an instant solution type of culture is completely antithetical to martial arts, where it take years to develop this. And depending on the type of martial arts and like your intention for it, be it sport or if it's for self-defense, it changes the style, it changes kind of everything you do about it, versus, you know, if you're doing it for your own self-perfection journey as its own art or philosophy. So if you don't practice, it's not like you're going to have it when you need it. So, and even more so when it comes to weapons. I'm not making light of those who are gun owners, but there is a valid concern as things are becoming more and more chaotic and the ante is up. I'm not making light of that. I am, however, questioning and concerned that we don't take the responsibility as seriously because we are so concerned about the potential outcome. Like, do you know how to store your gun properly? At least for Minnesota, it's the second leading cause of death for children under the age of 17 because it's not being stored properly. Some kid is playing with grandpa's gun that's on the rifle that's on the shelf that's just out and about and then shoots their sibling. You're never going to get over that. Like, the amount of like pain and regret for doing that because you couldn't be bothered to be responsible, it's unfathomable. So I understand wanting to feel safe. I understand deeply wanting to be in control or having any semblance of control in a time when you don't feel like you have any. I get that. I do. And you gotta have a plan. And I say that if guns, you know, if you feel safer having a firearm, fine, but you gotta be trained. And you have to practice, and you have to be willing to, especially if children in the house, you have to know how to store it well. Like, it's a responsibility. And it's the same thing even with my last AMA. you know, if people get the chance to watch it. If you're out and about in a city or in a group with people, there's no guarantee that other people are looking out for you. And I'm not saying that because like to look cast down on humanity is they're just self-absorbed. Like most people are pretty self-absorbed. So are you prepared as an escort, as, you know, a community member or like you're a household member to protect the people you're with? And if you're not, you better come up with a plan or several plans.
Yeah, definitely. And I just like to stress the fact that the concept that it's also not a guarantee, just like with martial arts. Like I mentioned it in the last AMA that like, you know, even if like you survive something, like I've gone through my own violent experience and like, you know, lived it, but you still get traumatized from it. So I feel like people come into martial arts thinking that, okay, if I defend myself, walk away, yeah, I'm empowered. But there's a lot that happens afterwards as well.
Jimmy, I'll piggyback on that. It's just like coming into martial arts thinking that it's the solution to a lot of your problems is not the case. And you'll be so vastly disappointed in thinking that because I know how to punch, I will know, you know, I will make up for the time I was bullied. I will make up for the time that I was robbed. And it's not, you can't use martial arts as an avoidance. You can use it as a skill, as part of your many tools in your toolbox to move forward in life so you don't live your entire life in fear of going outside. And that there is more of an inherent risk now because of an assault that we've seen on the streets. It's a tool, but it's not the only solution. And at an abolitionist standpoint, what you're willing to break down, what you're willing to destroy, you have to have something in replacement. What type of world are we building to replace the shitty one that we currently live in? What better tools and structures can we build to support our community and to sustain our community in a way that's loving and caring and, you know, accountable and compassionate? It
just reminds me about like my traditional martial arts teachers have always kind of said that's kind of helped me find balance in these situations, not to invalidate anyone's, you know, valid fears right now. You know, Asian elders are being attacked. There's a lot of racism around. Like we have valid like threats to our safety. But I just remember like one of the esoteric like things that one of my old instructors told me was like, if someone really wants to kill you, like they will. And that's more coming from like, you know, a character-based analysis, like who are you, like what kind of enemies do you have, how do you behave? If someone wants to like kill you, like they're gonna premeditate it so that, okay, they know you carry a gun, they're gonna wait for you to sleep type of thing. But also that's not to invalidate that. Like, there are threats that we randomly can't perceive, but that has always just kind of helped me like not be so like fear-based, like, oh, I need to train my knife and that's an end-all be-all. It's helped me focus on like the theme that we talk a lot about, like community building, trying to be a better person, kind of like those values that we get from traditional martial arts. And even like with guns, one of like my old buddies that was into it said something once that was like, if you think of carrying one, do you act differently when you carry one or not? And if you do, then that indicates something. You should really like look at yourself and your own character. And I feel like out of like white supremacists and enablers, they carry guns, but they probably feel like they're tougher because of it. So like, yeah, it just all goes back to like community building and character building, to me at least.